Joining us live for more on this, the Medical Journal of Australia editor, Nick Talley. Nick, appreciate your time. Big news out of New South Wales, your home state today. Restrictions being lifted. We can now see 300 people at weddings and funerals from Friday. 50 people allowed to gather outdoors. 30 people can gather inside at home. Is that a good call? Is it the right approach we're seeing being taken from the New South Wales government?
Ash, thanks. Yes, look, I think it is. We've done really well, not only in New South Wales, but across the country. We really have essentially zero known community transmission, and I think it's just terrific. And yes, it's very reasonable to lift some of the restrictions at this point, to keep a close eye on things, but to continue to do so. Obviously, though, if the virus comes back, if we start to see community transmission again, then clearly restrictions would need to be put back in place.
I see that you stress the word known community transmission in that answer, and I'm assuming the reason is that the testing rates are very low in New South Wales. We know authorities are concerned about that. We've seen the wastewater testing showing up COVID in some parts of the city, particularly in the south and the southwest. Are authorities, do you think, very worried that they could have missed chains of community transmission?
Look, I think there's vigilance, and I think people are certainly paying attention. It's almost certain there are some cases still out there we haven't picked up. And certainly the wastewater work, for example, would support that. But the good news is with the current, social distancing and what people are doing sensibly, it seems to be keeping it under very, very good control. So we haven't eliminated the virus, that's for sure, but it's as good as you get without a vaccine. And I think the country should be very pleased.
And when it comes to the vaccine rollout, what does the data that you've seen actually tell us about how the vaccines work in old people? Particularly, we've seen some question marks over the AstraZeneca vaccine. Are you confident that we will start to see fresh data that will be able to give people that added boost of confidence that it is safe for older people?
Yeah, well, they're both safe and effective, obviously, effective being terribly important. Look, we don't have any published data on, for example, the AstraZeneca vaccine and the elderly. Really, that wasn't reported in the Lancet paper that was published in December. While there are new data emerging, that's yet to be published and made publicly available. But we will have those data relatively soon, the next coming weeks, hopefully. The regulator clearly has some additional data. So it does seem as if we will know the answer. I guess I expect, despite some reports in the German press, for example, I expect the vaccine will work reasonably well in the elderly, maybe not quite as well as in younger people, but will still work. But obviously we need to see those data. That's terribly important. The Pfizer vaccine does appear to work in the elderly well, which is good news, but we'll have less doses of the Pfizer vaccine. There were also those reports of frail elderly deaths in Norway with possibly linked to the Pfizer vaccine, but certainly in dispute. So we'll have to keep watching what's going on around the world here very, very closely.
And we're obviously at such an advantageous position that we can do that. We have the luxury of watching the rollouts around the world. Supply constraints seem to be a big hurdle that the EU is facing. What sort of challenges, what hurdles do you envisage us having here in Australia?
Well, we're going to locally manufacture AstraZeneca, so that's the AstraZeneca vaccine. So that should be fine. But the Pfizer vaccine, well, while the government seems confident, I think we have to watch this space. My understanding was we would be receiving the Pfizer vaccine from Belgium. If the EU puts restrictions in place, and that's a little bit unclear at the moment, if they were to do so, that might impair us getting as many doses as quickly as we would like. But my understanding is we will be getting the 80,000 first week of doses on time. Let's hope that's the case.
What do you make of this idea of a vaccine passport? I interviewed the AMA president, Omar Khorshid, a bit earlier in the program. He said that's something the AMA isn't supporting at this point. Is it a good idea? Do you see many pros versus the cons in that concept?
There are pros and cons. The pros are obviously perhaps you could let people travel with some kind of certification they're successfully vaccinated, and that might reassure people. The problem is there's concerns that even though you're vaccinated and you may not get sick from COVID, you may still catch the infection and transmit it to others who are not protected. So this is the concern. And then how do you design a quarantine program, particularly to protect Australia from the variants, the nasty variants that are out there now, or potentially nasty. So I think it's pros and cons. I suspect, to be honest, it won't be the approach that will be taken, but we'll wait and see. We need to have more data on transmissibility after you've been vaccinated. That's a bit of a gap in terms of our understanding.
Nick Talley, appreciate your insights.
Thank you very much.